The sea that doesn't forget. Imagine a wind so constant, it forgets to stop. The kind that howls not from movement, but memory. Now imagine an island so far from anything. It doesn't appear on most maps unless you're trying very hard to find it. That's Eilean Moor, one of the 7 Flannan Isles off the western coast of Scotland. No trees, no shops, just grass like wet hair, rocks like broken teeth, and a lighthouse. 3 years old in 1900. It was meant to keep people safe. Lighthouses usually are. 3 men were stationed there that winter. Thomas Marshall, James Ducat, and Donald MacArthur routine work. Keep the light burning. Keep the log. Don't go mad. They didn't leave the island. They simply disappeared. No boat was found. No goodbye. No bodies, just silence. And the steady spin of the untouched light. The sea didn't report anything unusual. It never does. The keeper's room smelled wrong. When the relief vessel finally reached the island on December 26, 1900, delayed by storms that didn't quite behave like storms, they noticed something. Off, the island was still, which wouldn't be strange, except the stillness felt interrupted like someone had just walked away from a conversation mid-sentence. The lighthouse door was closed, locked. Even inside, the clock had stopped. The fire was out. 2 sets of oilskins, thick weatherproof clothing were missing. 1 set was still hanging. Donald MacArthur's, and in the kitchen, half-eaten food, a chair overturned, and on the logbook entries that sounded more like confessionals. Severe winds, the likes of which I have never seen Ducat quiet. MacArthur crying. The storm still rages, God is over all. There had been no storm reported by nearby ships, no storm until after the lighthouse went dark, and no one ever wrote in that log again. Shoes by the door, but no footsteps in the snow. Outside the lighthouse, not a single footprint. Not one. Not leading to the cliffs. Not wandering in confusion. Not the panicked scuff of 3 men trying to escape something they couldn't describe. Just the usual weather-worn earth and seabirds watching, like they knew. Birds always seem to know. They just don't say it out loud. Investigators theorize the obvious. They were swept into the sea, big waves, sudden squall, end of story. Except the waves hadn't been high enough. The cliffs were intact, no debris, no signs of struggle. And most unsettling of all, why had MacArthur gone outside in nothing but his shirt? In December, on an island where the wind can skin you, unless of course he wasn't planning on coming back. The lamp that burned too long. Lighthouses are loyal things. They spin, they shine, they guide. They don't ask questions, but this one? The lamp kept going. For days it rotated. Fuel wasn't infinite, and yet ships offshore reported it still working, like someone had been tending it. But no one was there. And even stranger, the log stopped on December 15th. That was 11 days before the relief crew arrived. The light should have gone out, but it didn't. Some said maybe the clockwork held on longer than expected. Others whispered, when no one official was listening, that perhaps the men never left. Not really, that maybe they just stepped out of sight, and the light kept spinning because something else didn't want to be found in the dark. Letters that never arrived back on the mainland. Families waited. They always do. Wives tucked notes into coat pockets. Children folded drawings into envelopes with trembling hearts and crooked stars. But the letters sent to Eilean Moor in those final weeks, they were never opened. Never read, some weren't even found. A sealed pouch containing weeks' worth of mail was discovered in a dry storage bin, untouched, unsorted. The kind of bin you'd only use if you were in a hurry or if you didn't plan to reply. One note never mailed was later found in a coat pocket, a single line, scribbled hastily in the margin of a weather report. The sea is louder tonight, like it's speaking names. It was signed with no initials, just a shaky hand and a blot of ink that looked too much like a tear. The Whispering Rocks. There's something odd about Eilean Moor's terrain. Not the cliffs or the grass, but the stones, the ones that hum. They're old, far older than the lighthouse. Locals say the island has always been strange, that animals avoid it, that gulls won't nest there, that compasses get distracted. One of the relief crew, a young assistant named Fraser, wandered off during the investigation. Only for a moment he said he heard someone calling him, a voice he recognized, his sister. But she died in a fire 3 years before. He returned pale, silent, and with a small, flat stone gripped tightly in his hand. He couldn't explain why he'd picked it up, only that it had been warm. Warm, and when they took it from him, it was ice cold. The final log entry that wasn't there yesterday. Weeks after the disappearance, someone went back. Not to search, just to check the Northern Lighthouse Board needed closure, or something that sounded like closure. Archivist Elspeth Monroe was sent to catalog the logs. She didn't believe in ghosts. She believed in handwriting, ink consistency, and rational explanations, until she turned a page that had previously been blank. One final entry had appeared. We are not three. The light turns even when we sleep. The door does not stay shut. No signature, no date, just those 3 lines, written in the same hand as the previous entries, but with too much pressure. Like someone was writing through the page. Elspeth did not return to Island Moor. She left her position quietly and was last seen burning old nautical charts in her garden. She said the ocean was hiding too many names, what the cat saw. The Flannan Isles didn't have permanent residents, but every lighthouse had a mouser. A cat trained to keep rats at bay. Theirs was a black cat named William Fat, sleepy-eyed and reportedly indifferent to storms. He didn't leave with the others, wasn't mentioned in the logs. But when the relief crew arrived, they found William curled on the windowsill, thin, trembling, and wide-eyed. He would not leave the room, would not eat. And when they tried to carry him outside, he clawed the inspector's face and bolted under the floorboards. He was never seen again. But each time someone returned to that lighthouse afterward, they swore they heard a soft, rhythmic scratching, like tiny paws pacing the walls. Some said it was just the wind. Others weren't so sure. Cats don't usually stare at empty rooms, like something's still in them. The clock that ticked backward. One of the oldest pieces inside the lighthouse was a brass pendulum clock, a gift from the mainland. It hung in the keeper's quarters, ticking out routine in a place that refused to stay still. When the inspectors arrived, they noted the clock had stopped, hands frozen at 9:03. But no one thought to ask 9:03. When? Weeks later, during cleanup, the clock began ticking again on its own. The new keeper, posted for just a week, noticed something strange. Each night around midnight, the second hand would stutter, pause, and then begin ticking backward for precisely 9 minutes and 3 seconds. Then it would stop. Dead silent, he replaced it 3 times. Each new clock did the same. He left his post early, requesting a mainland transfer. His reason? The hours aren't right here. The island that shifted maps are supposed to be still things. Fixed, measured, lined in ink. But something about Island Moor changed. Surveyors in 1901 noted the lighthouse was 2 degrees off axis from prior alignment. Nothing major, nothing that would concern a ship. But the thing is, you can't rotate a lighthouse, not one made of stone, not without shattering the foundation. One geographer insisted the island itself had tilted, shifted just slightly, as if turning its head towards something behind it. The soil samples were inconclusive. The angle of the sun changed, and shadows began to fall in directions that didn't match the time of day. The last visiting crew left early after someone said half-jokingly, "It feels like the island is watching us now," and no one laughed. Not really, just that quiet sort of chuckle people use when they're too afraid to admit they believe it. The fog that waited. Fog isn't unusual on the western Scottish coast. It rolls in like an old friend, uninvited but familiar. Except the fog around Island Moor began behaving strangely. It didn't drift or move. It lingered, hugged the lighthouse like a second skin, refused to lift even when the wind howled. In 1903, a supply boat reported waiting offshore for 3 full days. They could hear the horn, could see the beacon, faint and flickering. But the island? Gone, completely swallowed. When the fog finally cleared, there were no footprints on the pier. The supplies had vanished, all except 1 tin of biscuits half opened and set neatly on the welcome mat. Dry, not a crumb inside, but the tin was warm to the touch, like someone had just closed it. The captain marked it in the log, "Fog unnatural." Suggest weather not only atmospheric, the echo that wasn't yours. One of the new keepers placed briefly on the island in 1910 was a widower named Callum Norrie. He was quiet, practical, didn't believe in ghosts, didn't need to. He'd already lost more than the sea could ever take. But even Callum noticed the echo. It started in the stairwell, a second set of footsteps, always behind, never ahead, never quite in sync. He would cough and hear the echo, cough back a moment before he did. He stopped using the stairs at night, slept with the oil lamp burning, and then one morning he climbed to the lantern room and found the windows fogged from the inside. On the glass, a finger had written, "Still here." Callum left the next day, took the boat back to shore without his things. He never returned to the sea. The replacement crew that didn't last. By 1912, the Lighthouse had gone through 5 different crews, each stayed shorter than the last. No official complaints, just sudden transfers, resignations with no forwarding address, and one man who simply rode away in the middle of the night. The last full crew before the Lighthouse was fully automated in the 1920s lasted only 10 days. They left behind a journal. It wasn't meant to be found, tucked under a floorboard beneath the cot, inside drawings of the Lighthouse, but wrong. 2 tall, twisted stairwells, windows in places the building didn't have. One page read, "We tried not to look at the water after sunset. The reflection moves differently," and scrawled across the back cover in a messy final hand. "We are not the only ones keeping the light." The light that flickers still today. The Lighthouse is automated. No keepers, no journals, just machinery and routine maintenance. The official story still reads, "Men lost to sea during a storm." But ask the locals, the fishermen, the ones who steer wide around the island, and they'll tell you, the light sometimes flickers only once. Right at midnight, even on clear nights when nothing should cause it. And if you're close enough to hear the horn, you might also hear something else, a voice. Or 3 whispering names that haven't been spoken in over 100 years. The island that doesn't want to be found. Island Moor still stands stone against sea, unmoved, unafraid, unexplained. Tourists ask about it now and then. Some even charter boats. They rarely make it all the way. Engines fail, weather shifts, compasses. Forget what they're for. And those who do arrive, they never stay long. They say the air feels thick, that their phones won't take pictures facing the Lighthouse. That something always feels like it's behind them, even when they're standing against a wall. But most unsettling of all, they say, the island feels aware. Like it's waiting, watching, listening. And when they leave, even weeks later, some say they still hear it in dreams, in water pipes, in flickers of light that don't match the rhythm of anything electrical. Just a soft pulse on, off. The same quiet pattern of a lighthouse still keeping watch long after its keepers were taken by something that doesn't sign the logbook. The lighthouse with the piano that never stops playing. There's an island just off the coast of Maine. Not big, not famous. Just a stretch of windswept grass and dark pines surrounded by cold Atlantic waters that don't warm up even in July. Seguin Island. You can't see it from the mainland unless the sky is painfully clear, and most days it isn't. The fog rolls in like it has nowhere better to be. There's a lighthouse on Seguin. There has been for over a century and a half. It stands tall and white, a little too pristine for how old it is, almost like it's trying too hard to be noticed. Most people don't know this, but at night, if the wind is coming in from the east, you can hear piano music drifting across the water. The thing is, there's no piano in the lighthouse. There hasn't been one for a long time. The keeper who brought the piano. It was the 1850s when the piano arrived, brought over by a lighthouse keeper trying to make his young wife feel a little less trapped. The winters were long. Loneliness was longer, and she'd been a concert pianist once before marriage, before fog, before the silence began pressing in from all sides. So he surprised her, dragged the instrument up from the dock board by heavy board, up the winding path that felt more vertical than horizontal. He placed it in the keeper's house right near the window that faced the sea. She played for hours, Chopin, Satie, soft lullabies that didn't mind being lonely. But by spring, she stopped playing, stopped eating, stopped speaking, and one day she simply walked into the sea, wearing only white. The tide didn't bring her back, but the music did. The room that stayed cold. After she was gone, the lighthouse changed, not all at once, but in that slow, almost polite way. Buildings do when they begin to rot from the inside. The room where the piano had stood, it never warmed again. No matter the season, no matter how long the fire burned in the hearth. Even when the piano was removed, hauled away by men who didn't ask questions, the chill remained. One new keeper reported waking in the middle of the night to find frost on the inside of the glass. In August, with the stove still glowing red, he said it felt like someone was standing next to the bed, not touching, just observing. The next morning, he found a single damp footprint on the wooden floor, small bear pointing toward the sea. The music that followed. No pattern. After she left, the music didn't stop. It came randomly soft, half-finished melodies, barely louder than breath. Always after midnight, never the same song twice. Never complete. Visitors tried to rationalize it. The wind-old plumbing air in the pipes. But one technician sent to fix the foghorn was a pianist himself. He paused at the doorway, listened and said, "That's not wind, that's Debussy." He didn't finish the repairs. He left before nightfall, didn't collect his full pay, and when asked why, he simply said, "She's still practicing." The woman on the stairs, several keepers came and went. As they always do, Seguin is remote, the kind of place that wears you down gently like sea glass until you're smooth, quiet, and a little hollow. One man stayed longer than most, a war veteran, said he didn't mind the isolation, said he liked the peace. Until the third winter, he began hearing footsteps on the spiral stairs, always soft, always descending, never reaching the bottom. At first, he thought it was the building settling, or maybe his imagination unraveling like old rope. But one night he waited in the lantern room, let the steps come to him. When they reached just below his floor, he opened the hatch and saw no one. Just the faint scent of salt water and a pale handprint on the railing. Too small to be his, too recent to be old. The light that dimmed on its own. The beacon atop the Seguin. Lighthouse isn't supposed to dim. It's built not to. Designed for constancy, to cut through fog and memory without fail. But once a year, always on the same night, it dims. Not off, not out, just less. The Coast Guard has logged it, tested the wiring, replaced every bulb. No mechanical fault, no power loss. Just a brief, undeniable flicker, as if the light itself is remembering something it would rather forget. One former keeper stayed up to watch it. He said that during the flicker, he saw someone standing at the edge of the cliff, facing the sea-white dress, hair unmoved by the wind. When he blinked, she was gone, but the trail she left behind was wet. The letter in the floorboards. In 1978, during light renovations, a crew discovered an envelope wedged between the floorboards of the keeper's old quarters. It wasn't sealed, just folded, yellowed by time, edges curled like burnt toast. Inside, a single piece of parchment with a hurried message in smudged ink. She hums now. Even when the piano doesn't play, she waits by the lantern, but never looks up. I think she's forgotten she's dead. No name, no date, just a faint brown stain at the bottom corner. The workers put it back, not out of fear, but because it felt like it should stay there, like removing it might make the walls notice. And no one wanted to find out if the walls could answer back. The fog that moved inside. Fog by its nature stays outside. It rolls across the sea, clings to glass, stares in with blank eyes. But once, just once, a keeper reported fog inside the lighthouse. He wrote it in the log plane, dry, unblinking, low visibility in kitchen. Mist rolling downstairs, smells like seaweed and piano polish. He left the island 6 days later without collecting his last week's salary. The next keeper found the log open to that entry. The ink still wet, though no one had touched it in days. He turned the page to write his own note and found someone had already signed his name. In a handwriting that wasn't his, the mirror that refused to reflect. There's an old mirror in the second bedroom, oval framed in tarnished brass. It doesn't belong there, no record of it being shipped or installed, but no one can quite bring themselves to remove it, because when they try, they see something just behind their own reflection. Not clear, not loud, just there. A shape, a motion, a sleeve of white lace passing across the glass. Even when the room is still, one woman who stayed on the island as part of a research project said she saw her own face blink when she hadn't, and another time she turned to the mirror and saw herself playing piano. She doesn't know how to play piano. She asked to be transferred the next morning, didn't pack, didn't say goodbye. The sound, no one records, microphones don't pick it up. Not phones, not recorders, not even the old reel-to-reel tape someone once brought over to document the anomaly, but it's there, a soft hum like breath through wires, like someone thinking out loud in another room. It begins every night at 2:12 a.m. and always ends at exactly 2:27. Those who've heard it say, it doesn't seem human, but it doesn't seem not human either. Like a voice that forgot how to speak but still wants to be remembered. You can't capture it, can't prove it, but once you've heard it, you'll hear it again. Sometimes in your own home, sometimes just before falling asleep. A familiar melody played too slowly and from too far away. The visitor who wasn't on the list. In the summer of 1985, a small tour group visited Segan Island clear skies. Calm C1 of those rare golden Maine days. The group was small, 7 guests, 2 guides. But when the return boat arrived, there were 10 people waiting on the dock. The guide swore he'd only brought 9. One extra woman, wearing white, didn't speak, didn't eat, just drifted quietly from room to room, as if reacquainting herself with a long-lost home. When the boat departed, she wasn't on it. The guides didn't notice at first, not until they looked through the photos. In every group shot, she was in the background, near the piano room, near the stairs. And in the final picture, just her, alone in the mirror, smiling faintly where no one else had been. The window that opens itself. There's a window on the 3rd floor, south-facing, painted shut since the 1940s. Or so they thought one morning. The assistant keeper woke up to find it wide open. No footprints, no damage, just the sound of a gull circling too close, and the faint scent of salt and something sweeter, like perfume, left on a scarf too long untouched. He closed it, checked the lock. Next night, open again. They sealed it shut with nails painted over the edges. Still opened. Now they leave it alone. Because every time it opens, someone dreams of the sea, dreams of walking into it, and wakes up cold, with their shoes damp and facing the wrong way. The shoes that kept moving. It started as a joke, one of the newer volunteers trying to lighten the mood. He lined up all the shoes outside the bunkroom door neatly, like soldiers. Different sizes, pairs that hadn't been touched in years. The next morning, one pair was missing. He thought someone had moved them, but no one had. They reappeared 2 days later, placed beside the lighthouse stairs, wet with seawater laces, untied soles facing outward. He did it again and again. Each time another pair would go missing and return in a stranger place, on a windowsill beneath the piano, dangling by the laces from the lantern room ceiling. Eventually he stopped. He left them where they wanted to go. Some nights he said he could hear footsteps, barely there, as if someone was trying them on. The page that wrote itself. One of the last keepers to stay full-time kept a journal. Not of supernatural things, just weather, maintenance, the kind of records meant for quiet minds and long weeks. He kept it on his nightstand, ink, always fresh entries, neat. Until one morning he woke to find an unfamiliar entry. She is not angry, she is only cold. Play the last note for her. He didn't write it. No one else had been on the island. The writing was spidery, looped, elegant, female. He left the journal behind when he left the island. Couldn't take it with him. And when the next person opened it, those lines were gone, replaced by blank pages, except for the final sheet. You heard her too. The final note still playing. Segan Island. Lighthouse is automated now. The keepers are gone. The rooms are empty. The logs are digital. The shoes stay in closets, and the piano. Long since removed, but the island remembers. It always does. Volunteers still visit in summer to clean the place, give tours, make small repairs to a structure that doesn't quite want to be repaired. Sometimes, late in the season, a few of them sleep over just to save the trip back. just to say they did, and more than one has woken to the sound of music. Not loud, not cheerful, just a note or two, drifting from a room where no music is supposed to be. They don't talk about it in the newsletters, they don't put it on the brochures, but they all say the same thing. It's not scary, it's sad. Like someone left something unfinished, a song with no last note, a farewell that never made it to the lips. And when you stand in the lantern room right before dawn, if you're quiet, truly quiet, you might hear her hum. Just once before the sun rises and the sea forgets everything again. The island where time slows down. Lake Michigan is wide enough to lose your sense of direction if you stare too long at the horizon. And somewhere within it, south of nowhere in particular, there's an island shaped just like a sleeping body, South Manitou. It looks quiet from the water, a speck of land where time has politely dozed off. There's a lighthouse there, tall, pale, watching the lake like it once saw something too terrible and can't bear to blink ever again. People still visit on calm summer days with bug spray and trail mix. They take pictures, they hike, they say this is beautiful. But the locals, they say it's too quiet, that the island listens when you speak, and that the lighthouse has never truly been empty, not since the night the beacon wouldn't go out. No matter how hard they tried, the keeper who stayed too long. In 1871, a man named Elias Fenwick became the keeper. He wasn't a romantic man, didn't care for poetry or fresh air, he just wanted silence. And the island, ever obliging, gave it to him. Elias worked alone. He liked it that way, kept the logs neat, polished the lens until it gleamed like a frozen tear, lit the beacon exactly when the book said to. But after a few winters, the logs changed. His notes got shorter. Then stranger light still burns. Won't stop, no one here. But something stepped on the stair. I left the oil cold. Still it flared, and then it hums to me now. The lake, I mean. The light visitors said he looked tired. Thinner eyes like wet stones. He said the beacon was keeping him awake, not because it was bright, but because it whispered. The night the beacon refused to die. They say every lighthouse goes dark eventually. Maintenance, weather, boredom. Light can't last forever. But one autumn night, just before the frost took hold, Elias tried to extinguish the beacon. He followed the manual, closed the oil valve, snuffed the flame, waited, and the light dimmed for a moment, then flared again. Bright as before, no smoke, no sound, just a cold, steady glow that no longer seemed to need him. Elias wrote in the margins of his journal that night, "I am not the one tending it anymore." The glass hums, like breath on a window, like it's watching. The next day, he stopped writing altogether. When a supply boat finally came weeks later, they found the lighthouse still shining and Elias gone. No body, no signs of struggle. Just his boots beside the door and one perfectly polished lens still turning even without power. The replacement who heard her name. Of course, they had to send someone else. Lighthouses don't run themselves. Not officially, the next keeper was a young woman named Frances Bell. She believed in order, structure, routine. But even she admitted the place felt off. Her journal was careful, measured, but in the third week, she wrote, "I heard someone whisper my name outside the door, clear as anything, sweet and sad and familiar." She searched, no footprints, no boats. That night, the beacon turned itself on 3 hours early. And the radio, which hadn't worked in months, crackled to life with a single line, "Don't let it go out." Not again. Frances requested a transfer shortly after. But before she left, she filed a report. It was just one sentence. "The light doesn't need us anymore." The clock that counted backward. There's a brass clock mounted on the lighthouse wall, heavy, dented, older than it should be. It ticks softly like a whisper behind plaster. Every keeper since Elias noted the same thing. It runs fine during the day, steady, reliable. But sometime after midnight, always around 2:07 a.m., the hands stutter and begin to move backwards. Not fast, not dramatic, just slowly, as if time itself was being reconsidered. One keeper stayed up to watch it. He said the ticking didn't stop, but it began echoing. a second rhythm, just behind the first. And when he finally fell asleep at the desk, he dreamed of the lake frozen still, and of someone inside the beacon pressing their face to the glass, trying to get out. The room that didn't exist until morning. The lighthouse isn't large, 3 levels, 2 bedrooms. No surprises except once, in 1936, a temporary keeper named Jim Reinhardt woke up to find a door at the end of the hall. Painted the same color as the wall's brass knob. Faint outline, like it had always been there and he'd simply missed it. He opened it, stepped inside and found a small room bare but for a wooden chair facing the lake. He sat for a while, said he felt calm, said he thought he heard someone humming from under the floor. When he went back to bed, he noted the time, 3:03 a.m. The next morning, the door was gone. Just blank wall, no seam, no knob. He never found it again, but every so often he said he'd hear the chair creak when the beacon passed over the water. The visitor who wasn't logged. Most trips to South Manitou Island are recorded. There's a manifest names, dates always a log, except in the summer of 1954, when one extra person showed up. The ferry captain swore he only brought over 4 volunteer students helping with lighthouse upkeep. But the lighthouse log, written in crisp, unfamiliar cursive, listed 5 names. The 5th name, Lillian Glass. No one remembered her arriving. No one remembered her leaving. But every morning a fresh cup of coffee would be found on the windowsill, steam rising from it, half empty. And on the 3rd night, one of the students woke up screaming. She said she saw a woman in the hallway, long gray dress holding a lantern, mouth open like she was singing, but no sound came out. After that, no one slept upstairs. The whisper in the fog, horn lighthouses come with foghorns, big blunt machines, no poetry, just sound a warning, a voice without soul, except this one. In the late 60s, the foghorn began behaving oddly, not louder, not more frequent, but softer and stranger. A low moan that, if you listen closely, almost sounded like words. One visitor described it as a woman trying to remember a lullaby she hasn't sung in 100 years. Engineers inspected it, replaced the machinery, but the sound persisted, especially when no one was near it. And once, during a particularly thick fog, a ranger swore he heard his mother's voice coming from the horn. She died the year before. He doesn't talk about it now. He just won't go near the lighthouse after dark. The lantern that reflected things that weren't there. The beacon room at the top of the lighthouse is mostly glass, thick panes smudged by salt and time. You can see the lake from every angle, but sometimes when the light passes just right, you see things that aren't on the lake. Not in the lake either, just reflected. A figure standing where no one is. A second lantern where only one should be. Once, a man saw a horse-drawn cart trudging along the shoreline where no road has ever been. And then there's the woman. She only appears when the fog is thin, wearing something pale, sometimes smiling, sometimes crying, always watching the keeper like she remembers something they don't. One man smashed the glass after seeing her, said she winked at him, said she mouthed his name even though he'd never told anyone. The journal that wrote back in 1988, a new intern named Carla brought her own journal, a gift from her grandmother, hard leather cover, blank waiting pages. She wrote nightly entries, weather notes, restoration progress, and once, a little poem about the way the lake sounded when she was falling asleep. But on her 11th day, she opened it to find a new entry, not hers. Neat handwriting. Tidy, if old-fashioned, I used to write here too. The light hurts when it stays on too long. I still dream of the chair. Carla flipped through the rest of the book. More messages, some apologizing, some pleading, some simply saying, stay. She left the next morning, didn't take the journal, didn't even return to the mainland. She took the long ferry across the lake and didn't tell anyone where she was going. The journal's still there. Sometimes it sighs when the door opens. The light that casts the wrong shadow. Light is predictable. It moves in straight lines. It casts shadows opposite the source. That's physics. But in South Manitou's lantern room, things behave differently. A bulb was replaced in 1993. Bright, efficient, clean. But the first night it ran, a ranger noticed something strange. The beam hit the water as expected, but the shadows inside the lighthouse, they moved toward the light. Furniture elongated in the wrong direction. The spiral stairs cast no shadow at all, and the shadow of the lens itself seemed to rotate slower than the machine turning it. They thought it was an illusion until someone noticed a second shadow standing at the far end of the room. Still human shape, but with no body to cast it. When the beacon turned away, the shadow didn't fade. It stayed for 30 full seconds, then slipped sideways into the wall. The photograph with too many faces. A family visited in the early 2000s. Happy. Loud. One of those July groups that fills the island with sunscreen and snack wrappers. They took pictures, of course, lots of them. One was taken on the steps just outside the lighthouse entrance. Smiles. Peace signs. Nothing unusual until they got home and zoomed in. There between the two youngest children was a woman. Not quite smiling. Not quite looking at the camera. Wearing an old-fashioned coat, eyes too dark to catch the light. They swore she hadn't been there. They posted the photo online, got dozens of comments. Someone finally said, "She looks like Frances Bell, the keeper from the 1910s. They looked her up, found a grainy black and white portrait. Same coat, same face, same eyes. Only now she was in color. The steps that count themselves. There are 117 steps from the base of the lighthouse to the beacon room at the top. Every guide says it, every brochure prints it, but some nights there are 118, sometimes 119. Once someone counted 121. They thought it was a mistake. Tired legs, foggy mind, easy to miscount, until a ranger decided to mark each step with chalk. Tiny white numbers, barely visible. He counted them on the way up. 117. But when he came back down, the steps were renumbered. Higher in step 73. The one that creaked like it had something buried beneath it was suddenly marked. Heard just that one word by morning, all the chalk was gone. The door that opens only once. There's a rusted metal hatch in the floor of the beacon room. Bolted, sealed. Not on any map or blueprint. No one talks about it, it's just there. Like a scar you forget until it aches, but once, only once it opened, a summer storm had knocked out the main power. The backup was failing. 2 volunteers took shelter in the tower. Around midnight, they heard a slow metal groan, like something exhaling, and the hatch sealed shut for decades shifted slightly, just enough to reveal a sliver of darkness, colder than the rest of the room, smelling faintly of oil and roses. They left the tower immediately, never looked inside, but one of them swears she heard a voice just before they fled. It said, "I don't want to be forgotten." The light that never truly goes out. South Manitou's beacon was decommissioned years ago. Too costly, too remote, too old to justify the upkeep. They turned off the official power, removed the bulbs, closed the stairs to the public. The tower was declared inactive, but every so often from the mainland, a faint pulse is seen cutting across the dark lake. Locals call it the ghost flash. It lasts only a second, then disappears as if embarrassed to be noticed. Some say it's just leftover wiring or reflections from passing ships. Others say the lighthouse is still doing its job, not warning sailors but signaling the ones who never left. On calm nights when the lake is perfectly still, you can almost hear the soft click of the lens turning. Almost see a shadow in the top window. Almost remember someone's name before it slips away again. And if you stay long enough, if you wait just past sleep, you might hear the whisper that keeps the light company, a voice that's been humming the same tune for more than a century, slow, patient, and just a little out of key,